My name is Jessica, and at 29 years old, my parents called me a burden while living on the money I send them. Your brother is better, they sneered, so I cut them off and evicted them. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. Thanksgiving was always awkward in my family, but that year it became something altogether else. My name is Jessica, I am 29 years old, and have kept quiet for the majority of my adult life. I've always been the quiet, helpful one who doesn't ask for much, just stayed in the background and completed the tasks at hand. Perhaps that was my error. I suppose when people become accustomed to you being invisible, they begin to believe you are not truly present. Growing up, my brother Chris was the golden boy. He was a star quarterback in high school, received a college scholarship, and earned a business degree. My parents, particularly my mother, would light up whenever he entered a room. "That's my boy," she'd say, beaming like she was proclaiming royalty. Meanwhile, I was okay. I was just Jessica. I got good grades, kept to myself, found a job right out of college, and gradually began to establish a life. Nothing showy, simply solid, but somehow none of that seemed to count. The real kicker was that I was quietly keeping everything afloat. My father had a health crisis around 3 years ago and had to cut back on work. Of course, the invoices continued to arrive, so I stepped up and began paying the mortgage, utilities, and some of the medical expenses. It was never meant to be permanent, just something I could do to help. You know, family takes care of one another. Or so I thought. However, the longer I assisted, the less they seemed to notice. Or perhaps they observed and assumed it was owing to them. Chris never offered a cent. He'd arrive on vacation in his newest suit, raving about a conference he'd flown to in Dubai or Toronto. Mom fawned over his every word, as if he were some business messiah. Dad would simply nod along, sipping his whiskey, and seldom saying much, and I'd usually be in the kitchen checking the oven, bringing out dishes, and assisting with cleanup. Thanksgiving then began like all others. I arrived early to help Mom prepare, despite the fact that she hardly recognized me when I walked in. "The potatoes need mashing," she murmured as a hello. There were no hugs or smiles, only directions. I nodded as usual and began to work. Chris arrived an hour later with a bottle of wine and a new girlfriend, Emily, who appeared to be barely of drinking age. Everyone oohed and awed over her while I prepared the table unnoticed in plain sight. Dinner was the usual ritual, with Mom gushing about Chris's latest major moves, and Chris acting as if he invented the concept of labor. Emily laughed loudly at every one of his forced jokes while I sat there carving my turkey into smaller and smaller pieces, chewing slowly and remaining silent until the discussion changed. It began with something innocuous. Mom commented that it must be pleasant to live alone, meaning that I had it easy. I made a small joke, something like, "Yeah, the mortgage fairy sure helps with that," just trying to brush it off. But then she gave me this cold and sharp look and said, "You know, Jessica, you've always acted like you're doing us a huge favor. You're not. You're just a burden, always have been." The entire table fell silent for half a second. I blinked, certain I had misheard her, but before I could respond, Chris chuckled, shook his head, and said, "At least I make this family proud." There it was. That line was a stomach hit. Something about the way he said it made me feel as if it were a commonly accepted fact that I should already know and accept. It just made something in me stay still. I slowly set down my fork, pushed back my chair, and stood up. I didn't say anything, throw a fit, or even look at any of them. I stepped out, grabbed my coat, got into my car, and drove home. I recall the drive being strangely silent. I did not even turn on the radio. My phone buzzed once or twice, most likely from Mom asking where I went, or Emily wanting to make things right. I did not check. I simply drove in solitude, parked, walked inside, and sat on my couch for a long time, pondering. I reflected on every payment I had paid, every quiet sacrifice I had made, and every time I had been there for them when they needed it. Transportation, groceries, and last-minute repairs. I thought about how I had never been appreciated. No one had remarked, "We appreciate you." Instead, I was considered a burden after peeling potatoes for 6 hours and covering their mortgage again. For a while, I didn't know what to do. I was angry, yeah. More than that, I felt numb. I felt like I just realized something I should have understood a long time ago, They did not see me as a member of the family. They saw me as a tool, a utility, a wallet on legs. So I went cold turkey. There were no further payments, no more quiet assistance, no longer becoming the family's doormat. I did not send a message. I did not explain. I just let everything go. I turned off the automatic payment. I deleted the bill reminders from my calendar and carried on with my life. Weeks passed. Then one afternoon, my phone rang. It was Dad. He never actually phoned me. Even as a child, he preferred to delegate most tasks to others. So when I saw his name come up, I hesitated but responded. "Hey, Dad," I said. His voice sounded tight and irritated. "Jessica," he answered. "Why is the mortgage unpaid?" I asked without pausing. I simply sat back in my chair and remarked, "Ask your pride and joy." I then hung up, and that's when things started to unravel. The stillness following the call was both deafening and telling. Nobody reached out. Not Mom, not Chris, not even a half-hearted, "Hey, are you okay?" It was as if they expected me to retreat the instant the consequences hit, as if my absence had been nothing more than a tantrum, temporary. They did not comprehend yet, but they will. One day after Dad called, Mom texted me. No greeting, no context, simply, "We need you to sort out the mortgage before it affects our credit. Don't be childish." Harsh. That is the word she picked. No, we're sorry. No, let's discuss. Just a simple command, chilly and clipped. I stared at the screen for a long time, my thumb hovering. I could have said a lot. I could have poured out years of resentment in one long message, but I didn't. I typed one line and put my phone down. If they wanted to believe I was a cog in their machine, that's okay. Let's see how they do without me. The fallout was slower than I imagined, but it arrived. I began hearing things from my extended relatives, particularly my cousin Audrey, who lived a few blocks away. She called me one night, nervously laughing. Just a heads up. Your mom's been telling people you've been going through something, that you're not well lately." My stomach dropped. "Not well?" I repeated. "Yeah," she said slowly. "Mental health stuff. Saying you're having some kind of breakdown, that you're unstable, lashing out. She's spinning this story as if you're off the rails." I closed my eyes and breathed slowly. There it was. Classic deflection. Instead of confronting the truth, they were rewriting things, portraying me as the problem, making it appear as if I had snapped, that I was untrustworthy, unstable. It was simpler than admitting they had leaned too hard for too long, eventually breaking the one person who held the family together. I shouldn't have been surprised, but it stung. Anyway, what truly grabbed me was how they handled Christmas. It had always been at my house during the last few years, largely because I had the space and patience. I decorated, cooked dinner, and purchased thoughtful gifts. Even when money was tight, I made it feel worthwhile. But that year, I did not invite them. I didn't say anything. I assumed they would get the message. Instead, they organized their own gathering without informing me and shared a slew of happy group images on social media. Chris smiled next to Mom. Emily enjoyed a glass of wine by the tree. The caption read, "Grateful for family." Some people may leave, but the ones who matter always stick together. It impacted me harder than I anticipated. I wasn't even upset at first. I just felt hollow, like I'd been entirely ripped out. They did not miss me. They just patched up the gap I left and went on. However, the fissures appeared shortly after. Audrey contacted me again around mid-January. "You're not going to believe this," she said. "Chris is in trouble." I raised my eyebrow. "What kind of trouble?" "He quit his job." I blinked. "Why?" "He says he's starting his own thing, some consulting business or something, but rumor is he got pushed out, misused company funds or something shady. No one is saying the full story." This caught me off guard. Chris had always been the golden child, all appearance and little accountability. I'd wondered for years how he maintained his lifestyle without it catching up to him. Now it sounded like it had finally happened. I didn't say anything to Audrey at the time, but a faint idea crossed my mind. They'll come knocking again. And they did. It began with a lengthy note from Mom, unusually sweet and almost theatrical. "Hey, honey, I know things have been tense, but family is forever. We all say things we don't mean sometimes. Can we talk? Maybe have dinner soon. I'll make that roast you like." My response was silent. One day later, another note arrived. This one's from Dad. Clipped again. We're going through a rough patch. Mortgage is 1 month behind now. Your mother's upset. Can you please help us out? Just this once. I stared at my screen and chuckled. Just this once. I had been helping discreetly for years, without appreciation or credit. And now, after being labeled a burden and dismissed like a bitter shame, they wanted me to step in again, just this time. What struck me most was how little they appeared to realize what they had done. For them, I was still the backup plan, the quiet one, the assistance. They didn't comprehend that the silence was not transitory and that I would not be returning. They continued to press. Chris called one night. I did not answer, so he left a voicemail. I listened to it twice just to make sure I heard what I thought I did. Hey, Jessica, look, I know things got out of hand, but you've always been good with money, and I've got this business idea that could really take off. I just need a little startup capital. Thought maybe you'd want in on the ground floor like an investment. Win-win, you know. I sat in startled silence. It was not even an apology, not a genuine one, just a pitch. As if I were a venture capitalist, not his sister, as if he hadn't laughed in my face throughout Thanksgiving while I quietly bore the burden of his parents' financial security. Something in me changed following that call. I had remained quiet, but it wasn't only about the pain anymore. It was about clarity. I saw them for who they were, and, more significantly, what I wasn't to them. I wasn't family, I was a resource, and after I stopped being useful, they altered the story to make me the problem. But now I wasn't finished. I was done playing nice. That's when I started making plans. I did not rush the strategy. I am not the theatrical type. I've never been the type to yell, toss things, storm out, or demand that people recognize my worth. No, I favored quiet entrances and steps, allowing the quietness to speak for itself. However, when someone attempts to turn you into a villain just because you have finally stopped bleeding for them, it pierces harder. You begin to realize that quiet is insufficient. Not this time. The treachery, which changed everything, occurred roughly a week after Chris's voicemail. I was at work, sitting at my desk reviewing reports, when I received a call from an unknown number. I was about to let it ring out when something told me to pick it up. The voice asked, "Jessica Miller?" A man introduced himself as David Harris from Lakeshore Lending and said they were calling to follow up on a recent mortgage application. I froze. "Which application?" I asked. He read the address and the date. An application for a new loan at 324 Linton Avenue, submitted on January 11th. That was my listed address. I slowly sat back in my chair, the air thick around me. "I didn't submit any application," I said. There was a rustle of paper. David asked carefully, "You didn't authorize Chris Harris as a co-signer on this application?" My stomach churned. "No, I did not." He agreed to send over documentation. 10 minutes later, the email arrived. A scanned PDF file was attached. When I opened it, my name and information were all over the loan documents alongside Chris's counterfeit signature and income statement. He'd even entered my banking information, accounts I had not shared with anyone in years. Most insulting of all, the planned use of funds box had been marked as funding for a family business enterprise. I saw red. He wasn't just trying to take advantage of my generosity. He attempted to take from me. He attempted to put me in debt, the same house I had worked hard to afford, the same house they conveniently forgot about when they termed me a burden. I did not cry. I did not panic. I just sat there, still numb, the sensation you get after an accident when your body is fine, but your mind hasn't caught up yet. Then I carefully opened a new browser tab. I began by sending an email to my lawyer, Arya, whom I had previously worked with a few years ago. I wasn't sure if she'd take a personal case, but I laid everything out. Forged documents, bank information, and unlawful loan applications. I attached screenshots and Chris's voicemail. Within 20 minutes, she replied, "I can help. First step is locking down your credit. Second step is reporting this to the authorities. Third step is deciding how loud you want to be." The last line remained with me. How loud would I like to be? I'd spent my entire life being quiet, avoiding confrontation, and choosing peace over conflict. But now they had gone too far. Chris had tried to put me in debt without asking. My parents had portrayed me as unstable to conceal their own negligence, and when I stopped providing, no one asked why. They simply demanded more. No, this time I would be loud. I would be undeniable. That weekend, I didn't respond to anyone. I sorted through old receipts, bank statements, and emails. I created a timeline. Every payment I had made for my parents, every mortgage deposit, every expense I had incurred. I labeled, dated, and placed them into a neat folder. I wanted a paper trail so clean it could cut through glass. Monday morning, I filed a police report for attempted identity theft and fraud. I handed everything over to Aria, who drafted a cease and desist letter for Chris, prohibiting him from using or accessing any of my bank records or personal information. She also included language that protected my home from any further activity without my clear written consent. For good measure, I froze all my credit accounts, changed every password, and enabled two-factor authentication on everything. Chris was not going near anything I owned again. 3 days later, Chris called me. This time I answered. "Jessica," he said as if we were longtime friends. "Hey, listen, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "Save it," I told him. "What?" he protested. "I know what you did. I have the documents. The bank called me directly. I've already filed the report, and you'll be hearing from my lawyer." There was a pause followed by a nervous laugh. "Come on, it wasn't like that. I just needed a little help. I figured we'd both benefit." It wasn't even an apology. He truly believed he was entitled to my life and my finances because, in his view, he mattered more. I hung up without saying another thing. The days that followed were some of the most difficult I'd had in years. Not because I was in danger of losing my home, I'd secured everything, but because the silence from the rest of my family revealed how deep their denial ran. They didn't call to check on me. They doubled down, telling anyone who'd listen that I was the one trying to ruin the family, that I was making it up for attention. Audrey called again, voice tight. "Your mom's telling everyone you're trying to get Chris arrested," she said. I didn't reply. I stood in my living room, holding my phone and looking out the window. It was a dreary, overcast day, one of those afternoons when everything feels as if it's on hold. But something inside me had utterly deflated. They weren't just excusing Chris. They were making me the villain, because it was simpler than admitting they had failed me. I began skipping meals, not on purpose. I would lose track of time and then discover it was 10 p.m. I hadn't eaten anything all day. My sleep became uneven. Some nights I'd lie awake, recalling every Thanksgiving, birthday, and occasion. I'd smiled through pain, just to preserve the peace. The thing that broke me was not even dramatic. It was a Wednesday morning. I opened the fridge, saw a half-empty carton of eggs and old bread, and realized I lacked the energy to cook. So I sat on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, and looked at nothing for nearly an hour. That was my lowest point, my calm rock bottom. No screaming, no spectacle, just emptiness. I didn't seek vengeance in that moment. I didn't even desire closure. I just wanted to stop caring. I wanted to let go of the desire for their acceptance, to understand that it would never come and that nothing I accomplished would ever be enough for them, since they never wanted me to succeed. They simply wanted me to remain in place, useful, invisible, and silent. The following day, I did something I had not done in a long time. I packed a backpack, got into my car, and drove to the lake. There's a small cabin out there, nestled among tall pines, with a crooked little pier that creaked when you walked on it. It once belonged to my grandfather. He left it to me after he died, most likely because I was the only person who ever visited him. I hadn't gone out there in almost 2 years. There is no cell service or noise, only wind, water, and the sound of birds. I stayed for 3 days, didn't tell anyone, and didn't bring my laptop, just a notepad, some books, and a thermos of coffee. I sat by the lake, walked the trails, and allowed my mind to calm. The idea began to take shape, not of vengeance, but of freedom. I had been clutching the idea of family for so long, as if proving myself enough would make them notice me, love me, and be proud. That family did not exist for them, so I began thinking about how to leave, not out of spite, but out of need. When I returned home, I started making modifications. I removed my name from everything related to my parents, no emergency contacts, no shared financial accounts. I contacted the bank to ensure any future joint applications under my name would be flagged. I also provided Aria power of attorney to act on my behalf in any relevant circumstances. Then I quietly started looking into job transfers. My company had branches in Oregon and Colorado. I hadn't told anyone. I just wanted to know what it would be like to start over somewhere no one recognized me as the disappointing daughter or background sister. I didn't rush it. I wasn't making a big announcement. But for the first time, I felt like I was creating something for myself. I sat alone at the dining table long after everyone had gone to bed. The house was finally quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that makes you hear your own heartbeat, your own doubts, your own exhaustion. I stared at the half-finished mug of tea in front of me. It had gone cold, but I didn't move. I couldn't. My body felt like it had been drained of something essential. Choosing the family you want. The words played in my head, looping like a song stuck on repeat. Ella was finally resting peacefully upstairs. Arya had gone to her room after saying goodnight, giving me a long, firm hug, the kind she hadn't given me in years. And me? I just sat there, staring at the tabletop, wondering if this piece was real or another fragile moment waiting to collapse. For so long, I had clung to the idea that family was something you maintained, no matter how cracked or bruised it became. That love meant endurance, that patience would eventually be rewarded. But tonight felt like the first honest breath I had taken in years. Because for the first time, Ella didn't ask me to be something else. For the first time, Arya didn't walk away from me. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was holding everything together by myself. I closed my eyes. Maybe this is what choosing yourself feels like. Not selfish, not cruel, just necessary. I finally stood up, rinsed the untouched tea down the sink, and turned off the kitchen lights. The house fell into darkness, except for the soft glow of the hallway lamp, the one Ella insisted we keep on because she hated waking up to pitch black. Halfway up the stairs, I paused. From Ella's room, I could hear her soft breathing, steady, safe. A small, warm ache settled in my chest. Whatever happened before, whatever pain came from those who were supposed to protect me, whatever love I lost, what I had now, this tiny rebuilding family, was real. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of losing it anymore. Because it wasn't built on obligation. It wasn't built on guilt. It wasn't built on pretending. It was built on choice. And this time, they chose me too. I went to bed with a strange sense of peace blooming in me, small but alive, something I hadn't felt in years. Maybe, finally, this was the beginning of something better. The sunlight in the kitchen grew brighter as the morning settled in, painting soft golden stripes across the table. For once, the brightness didn't feel intrusive. It felt like a gentle reminder that a new day was beginning, whether we were ready for it or not. Ella finished the last few spoonfuls of cereal, swinging her legs under the chair, humming a tune she definitely made up on the spot. Her joy was so simple, so effortless. It made me ache in places I didn't know were wounded. Arya sat in silence, slowly stirring her oatmeal, though she wasn't eating it. She kept glancing in my direction, as if searching for the right words, or maybe for permission, or maybe for forgiveness without having to say the word. After a long minute, she finally asked, "Can we do something together today? Like, all of us?" Her voice cracked on the last part. Ella almost jumped from her seat. Yes, let's go somewhere. Mommy, can we? Please, please." The sound of that one word, Mommy, hit me harder than anything else this week. Even though she'd always called me that, this time it felt different. There was no hesitation, no conflict, no shadows from the past. Just love. I took a breath, letting the moment settle in my chest. "We can go wherever you two want." Ella gasped dramatically. "Anywhere?" "Anywhere within reason," I corrected, smiling. Arya pushed her bowl away and crossed her arms. "So no mountains or waterfalls?" "No mountains," I laughed. "Not today." Ella leaned over the table. "The park, the one with the ducks." Arya nodded slowly. "That sounds good." But she said it in that shy, careful way, like she was easing herself back into a home she thought she had destroyed. My heart squeezed, soft and protective. "Okay," I agreed. "The park it is." Before we left the house, I went back upstairs to change clothes. My room felt different today. Not lighter, exactly, but less suffocating. I opened the closet and paused. On the top shelf sat a cardboard box I hadn't dared touch in months. Inside were old letters, photos, and gifts. The remains of relationships that had fractured beyond repair. The remnants of a family I tried desperately to keep alive. For years, I believed closure meant holding on. Today, for the first time, I realized closure might mean letting go. I reached for the box. My hands shook, not from fear, but from relief. Then I carried it downstairs. Ella saw it first. "What's that?" "Just something I don't need anymore," I said, keeping my voice steady. Arya watched quietly, unsure. I took the box to the porch, opened the lid, and removed the first photograph. In it, I looked younger, tired but hopeful, still believing that people who hurt you could someday love you the right way. I ran my thumb over the edge once, just once, and placed it back inside. Then I closed the box. Ella stepped closer. "Mommy, is that sad?" "A little," I said honestly, "but sometimes you have to make space for better things." Arya hesitated, then reached out, slowly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed, and touched my arm. "Does that include us?" she asked. I looked at her, at the girl who had pushed me away, at the girl who had been manipulated into believing someone else loved her more, at the girl who was now bravely choosing to come back to me. "Yes," I answered softly, "especially you." Her eyes glistened. She didn't cry. She'd always been the type to swallow her tears before anyone saw them, but she stood a little closer to me, close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. It was enough. Together, we carried the box to the recycling bin. Together, we closed the lid. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The park was almost empty when we arrived. Morning air crisp, sky washed clean, ducks floating lazily across the pond. Ella ran ahead, laughing as she tossed breadcrumbs into the water. Arya and I walked slower. "Do you hate me?" she asked suddenly. Her voice was so small I almost missed it. I stopped. "Why would you think that?" "Because—" She looked down at her shoes. "I said awful things. I believed awful things, and I didn't listen when you tried to help me." "Arya," I said gently, touching her shoulder. "Children believe the adults who talk the loudest, and sometimes the wrong people are louder." She swallowed hard. "I hurt you." "Yes," I admitted quietly. "You did." She flinched. "But you're here now," I added, "and that matters more than what happened before." Her breath caught. Then she nodded once, sharp, determined. "Okay," she whispered. "I want to be better." "You already are," I said. She didn't hug me, but she walked a little closer than before. Hours passed. The girls fed the ducks, climbed the playground, fell in the grass laughing until their hair stuck to their faces. And I watched them, really watched them, feeling something I had forgotten existed. Hope. Not desperate hope, not fragile hope, just the quiet kind that settles deep in the bones. As the sun began to set, Ella crawled into my lap, tired and warm. "Mommy?" "Yes." "Are we a real family now?" I kissed the top of her head. "We've always been a real family," I said. "We just needed time to find our way back to each other." She murmured something sleepy and nonsensical, and within minutes she was out cold. Arya stood beside me, looking at the water. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me." I smiled. "I almost did, but I didn't." She nodded. "Good, because I need you more than I knew." Something broke open in my chest, something gentle. I shifted Ella carefully and offered Arya a spot beside me on the bench. After a moment of hesitation, she sat. Not touching, but close. Close enough to feel like the distance between us was finally shrinking. And in the fading sunlight, with one daughter asleep in my arms and the other sitting beside me, quiet, steady, trying, I realized something profound. I had not lost a family. I had rebuilt one. Piece by fragile piece. Choice by brave choice. Heart by healing heart. And this time no one could take it from us. Because it wasn't built on lies. It wasn't built on fear. It wasn't built on what hurt us. It was built on us.